Hi, welcome to BA Brew. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Debbie.
I'm Corinne.
Mike.
Today we're going to speak about the subject of resilience, and this is a subject that Corinne has suggested to us. Corinne, can I come to you first? What's behind suggesting resilience to us as a subject?
Oh, I think, Jonathan, it's a topic that's fascinated me. So I've spent a couple of years now studying positive psychology. And for me, resilience is a huge topic, a really fascinating topic. But the whole time I was studying it, I just kept coming back to my BA toolkit, things I could do as a business analyst that helped me be resilient. And I realized how resilient I was.
Wow. So you've been studying this. So if you ended up doing a dissertation, is that right?
I did, yeah. So I've done a dissertation, and thank you to some lovely business analysts I interviewed. So I interviewed some experienced BAs who've been through some challenges, either personally or in the workplace, because I was fascinated to see what skills they've built. And I've particularly focused in on adaptability and their sort of professional resilience and their career adaptability, but also the personal side of it came out. And I think you can't separate your personal and professional life, but they do come together to help you be resilient. And we're all more resilient than we think we are.
Yeah. We agree. We think this is a really interesting and important subject. And I'm really excited about today's pod, and I hope you guys are as well. Mike, your thoughts on resilience, an important subject that we should tackle?
Absolutely. And I really like the idea that you can use your BA skills to help build your resilience, because actually there's loads of things there. And it kind of put me in mind of, well, maybe everybody needs to learn these BA skills, because if they're important for resilience, then we need to help the rest of the world, don't we?
I think that's a really good point, actually, Mike, because, when you look at the extent of BA skills, part of the toolkit is working with stakeholders to help them be resilient through change. Mm-hmm. Well, therefore, we understand those tools, like the Sarah curve. We understand emotional response to triggering events, if you like, and therefore we've got these techniques that we can apply in our lives, in our families' lives, in the lives of people who maybe we're supporting as well. And I think that's a really, really good way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Is it worth for the audience just explaining for a second the Sarah curve, Debbie?
Okay. Well, the Sarah curve is a state of 5 states that actually determine a pathway, if you like, through emotional response to change. And it begins with shock. So that's the S in Sarah. Then moves to anger. Then moves to rejection. And I just think these states are really important to be aware of, because sometimes you don't know why you're feeling something. Mm. But beyond rejection, you move into starting to accept this is what has happened, this is the change. And ultimately, and Corinne and I, we've discussed this, there is that hope, that light at the end of the tunnel. And I think understanding those steps and understanding that it is a natural emotional response pathway helps you to actually be resilient. What do you think, Corinne?
I think very much so. I think and I would pick up 2 things. I think the word emotion, sometimes in the business place, can be difficult. You don't show emotions at work. And I know personally for me as an analyst, it will be, I mustn't show my emotion, but we are emotional, and to not necessarily show them, but to recognize we're having these emotions is important. And I think the other thing with that Sarah curve, which I've discovered through my personal experience, is it's not necessarily linear. You have an initial shock when there's a trigger, an event, something that happens, go through the denial, anger. You might start to think, actually, I'm getting on top of this. You only need one small thing to come, and then you're back at the shock, anger, denial. And I think recognize that in yourself and in others and stakeholders we're working with. You might say one small thing in a workshop that seems trivial to you, but if it happens to trigger them, they could go from being really supportive, on board, back to like angry, might walk out the room, and you've got no reason understanding why, but it's something that's triggered them.
And one of the things I like about Sarah curve is it gives us a framework from which we can discuss those emotions with our stakeholders and talk about the change journey if we want to, and talk about how it's okay to, you can regress from acceptance to rejection if you or into anger again if something changes. And I think that having the language to label your emotions and then allowing you to talk about them, I think it's a really key aspect in terms of building resilience individually, as a professional and on a personal basis, to be able to talk about and label your emotions. Mike,
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's really key actually, because we talk about it as a change curve. We're all experiencing changes of some magnitude as we go through our professional lives, our personal lives, etc. And yeah, they can have quite an emotional impact on you. But I think the key is spot it. If you can see the change and you can spot it's had an effect on you, then you can perhaps do something about it. Think, well, why am I feeling like that? Why has that affected me that way? And we've spoken previously before, Corinne, about mindfulness, how actually kind of detaching yourself from the event and what's going on, and actually having a bit more of a look at things can be really, really good to help you with that. And I've found that really, really powerful.
So is this a good point to talk about how do we individually help to build our own resilience then? Because mindfulness comes with a set of tools and techniques, and I don't think it's a silver bullet, but I do think the tools and techniques for some people can be really useful to try and compartmentalize where you are and what's going on. Meditation, exercise. I think spending time with friends, family, your colleagues, and having a work-life balance that's healthy, I think is really key from a personal resilience perspective. Debbie, any kind of hints and tips for resilience from yourself?
Yeah, I've got one, and this is going to astonish Corinne now, okay? Because it's an NLP technique. And it's one that I was told about years and years ago by somebody I used to work with who was an NLP master practitioner, which I think you are as well, aren't you, Corinne?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. And what he said to me was, think of an event that happened to you that was unpleasant and you had to be resilient and you had an emotional response. And then think about how you felt about that event 6 months later or a year later. And take what is happening to you now and project forward 6 months or a year to think about how you might feel, because it will give you additional and different perspective. And I find that simple technique incredibly useful, because I can think back to situations that affected me, really, really deeply. And then I think, okay, how did I feel 6 months after that or a year after that? And what perspective did time give me? Now, can I apply that thinking to where I am now? I find that incredibly useful.
Wow. So it's kind of using a time machine to zoom out from the event in a way. Wow. Corinne, you're the master of this.
I do think it's an amazing and really useful tool, because I was thinking about sometimes we get overwhelmed by our thoughts. I mean, we've got amazing brains, but when we face a difficulty, I get that voice in my head and it always looks at this could happen and that could happen, and I really find myself catastrophizing quite easy, and the voice can become very overwhelming. So things like you said, Jonathan, about getting out for a walk, giving yourself some space helps, but also that for me it's distancing myself from that. It's almost like, I think you mentioned compartmentalizing, but putting the thoughts to one side from the time. And also maybe sometimes just allowing yourself permission to worry or have thoughts for, say, 10 minutes in the morning, and then I'll get on with the rest of my day.
That I do think the BA Toolkit extremely useful to help you to build resilience. But one of the things that we can do, scenario analysis, not always helpful. It can definitely help us worry and think about these kind of extreme things that could happen. And sometimes it's particularly for, I think, business analysts, we're very used to thinking about scenarios and it's not always useful. Mike, you've got a plethora of hobbies. Do you think do they help you with your resilience, your stress management?
Well, I would say when I'm working at the apiary with the bees around me, it really does concentrate the mind. I can't think about anything other than right. I've got all these bees flying around, and they're trying to get into this suit to sting me. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant mindfulness technique. Having some imminent threat around you like that. Probably get the same from rock climbing. I don't do rock climbing or any of those kind of dangerous sports. The most dangerous sport is beekeeping. But yeah, so I do that. I go running. That's quite good. Not always very fast, but again, that you can kind of mull over the problem a little bit and get a slightly different perspective. I also have loads of different hobbies. The other one that's probably quite useful is the fruit flavored alcoholic drinks. So one or two of those also helped, but yeah, it's actually applying myself to different hobbies, not necessarily drinking lots of those alcoholic drinks, but it can be really useful. I think for me, probably the biggest thing I do is try to see some positive outcome, try to look for a positive outcome and then aim for that and try and think, well, how can I nudge towards that positive outcome? And even if I can't get to that positive outcome, it's a bit of a mind flip, so you can kind of stop some of the catastrophizing and look for something good and then try and work towards that helps, I think.
I know we were talking about this earlier, but kind of think about the positives that you can learn from the episode, from the event, from the experience. What can you learn from it can also be quite powerful, I think, but that power of reflection really quite key. Corinne, I think you've got a model. Is it a 4Cs model? Would you be happy to share that with us?
Yeah, because I was curious when I started my work with resilience and I was looking at careers and career frameworks. So resilience for me is all about being flexible, being adaptable. And some of the research I had looked at into resilience said it's actually our normal process of adaptation as we go through life. Well, I found this career framework model, which is called the career adaptability model, and it had 4 competencies in it to allow us, because careers are the world we work in is complex. Careers are not sort of static, and it's not clear the path we move through, so we have to be adaptable. And this framework talks about us having control, concern, curiosity, and confidence. So for me, and when I was doing my research, I explored these competencies and phrases that the BAs were using that sort of gave me an indication that was a competence they had. And they did come up a lot. I think triggering event happens, something happens that puts us into shock. You do have a certain amount of concern about it, and it can feel initially that everything's out of control. And by stepping back and thinking, actually, I'm concerned about this. What are the things I'm concerned about that I can't control, and what are the things I can control?
Yeah,
that's where coming back to again our BA toolkit. We'll do some investigation into the situation. What's going on? What can I control? What can't I control? But also the BAs very quickly. We talked about the emotional response, but then turned around, started to be curious about this. Okay, so what's going on here? What and all the different perspectives, and how do I bring all this together? And they had a real learning attitude and a real curiosity to want to find out about what was going on, and that in turn built their confidence. So I think those 4 together have some real impacts on your resilience if you can work on those things.
I find it fascinating is applying the BA toolkit to help yourself to build resilience, and you can do it for yourself, for your teams. I think that's fascinating. Debbie, importance of a network and team around you in resilience. Do you think that's a key theme here?
I think it's really important, but it's also, I think, a personal thing, because some people actually, they like to maybe think it through. I suppose this comes back to the control element, to be honest, Corinne, which I've sort of talked and been involved in situations with several friends where I have used the phrase, you need to start taking a bit of control of this situation. and you need to think through how you can do that, which takes us into scenario analysis
Yeah.
and things like that. Because at the moment, your response is very emotional because you feel out of control and things are affecting you. So I always think that taking control is a good idea as much as you can. But I also think that if you have a support network, it's also about accessing it when you need it, because some people actually need time to themselves to reflect. You know, I mean, I live inside my head. My mother will tell you I have been thinking ever since I was born, you know. So I do like to think things through quite a lot. And then having that support network that you can talk to. And I think the BA community actually is an incredible community of people, because I look at, you know, some of the posts on LinkedIn about all sorts of things. It is so supportive. It's amazing. So professionally, I think we all have some very, very good supportive networks, and they can be really, really invaluable at the point where we need to access them. But also, you know, your family and your close friends, it can be there to cushion things and to help you through things. And I'm sure we've all found that in different situations.
There's just thinking times in your life professionally, maybe you make a mistake, and you if you've got a team around you that's supportive, you can say, I've made a mistake, can you help? And sometimes if you're in a team where you're giving that support, someone helps you through that challenge, that can be really quite powerful. Because if you're in a team where you're not helped and people don't support, and you're castigated for having made the mistake, and obviously mistakes aren't desirable, but it's really quite stark, those types of teams where you are supported and those where you're not. And personally, I find that it's not helpful for my own resilience to be around a team where there is limited or no support. And I think if you're in one of those teams, you need the curiosity to realize that you know, and the concern that maybe that's not the best place for you to be working if you do need that support for your resilience. Mike, I'm sure your teams have always been supportive, haven't they?
There have been moments, not recently, but yeah, I would say I remember one place I was working at, we had, it seemed to be sort of annual redundancy exercises. Wow. And that would sort of come around, and that was quite a shock to people, although they got used to it after a while. But that thing about taking control was quite an important point there, that some people are just sort of carried along with the change and they just let the change bash them about and really sort of take them through all kinds of challenges. And actually, it was interesting, there were some people who decided in one of these redundancy exercises that they wanted to take control. They weren't going to allow the redundancy exercise to drain what sort of things, what resilience they got left. And they found another job and just resigned before the redundancy process had happened. And that was them taking control. They found a way of taking control. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have advised that at the time, but that was what they did. And actually, even if you can find small elements of things you can take control, you can still sort of find your path through. So,
wow. One of the things I use is something called a resilience well. I'm not sure if this is a recognised term, but it's kind of it's a concept more than a physical well. So I kind of think, right, okay, where am I? Do I need to top up my resilience well? And that resilience well might be topped up by me walking the dog and listening to a podcast of all things, or taking my son out to play football, or watching my favourite movie, or whatever it is that I feel at that moment will help me. And I think that just having an awareness of whereas my resilience level, my stress level, I think can help. Corin, have you come across that resilience well, or is it something that I've made up?
Trademark it, Jonathan, quick.
Not heard of it, but I completely understand the concept of what you're talking about. And I think one of the key things you talked about there is actually self-awareness,
Yeah.
knowing yourself. And I think I said at the beginning, we're all far more resilient than we think we are, but actually just knowing a little bit about ourselves, how we react, what space we need to think before maybe we ask for support,
Yeah.
what things we know that we do that fill our well up, that top
Yes.
us up.
Yeah.
And we've talked about things, each of us will have things we love to do and they're personal to us, but being able to do those removes the chatter, removes the worries, gives you the clear mind to then come back to it.
Yeah.
I do like that term, the resilience well.
Yeah, I tell you, Jonathan, you need to
Put in it.
patent or trademark or something. The next book, 124th Technique, the resilience well.
Resilience well. And we'll get some stick for that.
It's such a good point, though, because I know if I'm feeling something's happened, and I'm thinking, oh, and you know how you just sink, don't you? And you think, oh, one of the things I do, and I know this about myself, is I love to have a chat. Okay. No, I know you're shocked. And so there are various people that I can just ring up and just chat. And sometimes it's a chat about work, but just that human engagement about something lifts my spirits. And it's a very similar concept to your resilience well.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've had the pandemic recently, and that level of interaction, that kind of the chat that we might have had over a coffee. It's one of the reasons why we've got the BA Brew. I think it's one of the ideas that led to this podcast, was that we can sit and have a chat over a coffee and have that connection. So I don't know if that's helping any of the listeners at the moment as they listen to us chat.
It's helping us, though, isn't it? That's all that counts.
It's only helping us.
Yes,
Stopping up
I'm
my
doing
work.
well.
It's helping us.
Corinne, any kind of final thoughts, things that we have to cover on this pod that we haven't covered so far?
Oh gosh. So I was thinking of, and it's linked, I think, from that sort of concern and control thing, where we've initially, and also linking into shock. When something happens that shocks us, we feel out of control, concerned, and for me, it felt like I've faced some really challenging personal situations recently, and it felt like my whole world was imploding. But as soon as I could find one thing to look forward to, and it's building up on what Mike said, I could sometimes just find one thing at the end of the day, a nice cup of tea or something really small. But as soon as I could start to find my way through something, so I began to have hope or optimism, it completely changed it. And I felt that I did have some control. I felt that I could find my way through the difficult situation.
Wow, that's really powerful. Right?
And it doesn't have to be huge, because I think positive psychology is sometimes being challenged. Oh, it's a bit Pollyanna-ish and everything's wonderful, and you always look at the positives, but it doesn't have to be massive. It can just be one small thing, and you just focus on something, and you start to find that you're moving. I'm moving through it.
Wow,
handling it.
Mike, anything we need to cover that we haven't covered so far on this pod?
Oh, there's at least another 30 or 40 minutes we could keep talking here, but I don't know, that the power of finding something positive, as one says, even something small, it just gives you some glimmer. I think knowing people around you that care for you and actually can offer you some advice, that just remember, no matter what your resilience is like, there's other people out there that can help you as well. So you don't have to do it on your own. I think that would be my thing. And sometimes somebody else might spot that you're struggling with something and you haven't really realized you're in that sort of downward spiral, and they say, well, why? I don't know. There might be something about your behavior, and they think, oh yeah, and actually listen to them, and that'll help.
Debbie, what have we missed? What do we need to cover before we finish today's pod?
Well, I think there's so many different things we could talk about, but I think we've covered a lot of the key things. And to me, knowing your strategies, I'm going to do it again, in your resilience well. Sorry, Jonathan, I'm sold on it. Okay. but we all have our strategies in our resilience well. And I'll just finish my thoughts with this. Over the last 18 months or so, things have been tricky in the world. Do you know how many people, friends, family, who have just gone into box sets or streaming sets of various series? It's like a universal resilience well item, and I'm one of them. And I think anything that takes you away and helps you be somewhere else is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that Friends hasn't been mentioned up until this point, Debbie.
I was deliberately not mentioning
as something that helps to build resilience. The other comedy shows are available. Right. I think that will bring us to an end of today's BA Brew. I want to say a massive thank you to Corinne for suggesting this as a subject, and also to all of you for listening and for watching today. I think it's a really important subject, and my kind of final thoughts on this is that reach out for support, think about your well, but I think resilience is something that you can build. We're not born with resilience necessarily. We can build it as a skill, and we can keep working on it. And I hope that today's pod has helped some of you that are listening or watching. So many thanks. If you've got any suggestions for subjects, please email us at babrew@ciskd.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we find ourselves at the end of season 2. It's been quite a journey. I'd like to thank everyone for listening in and for watching. I'd also like to extend a massive thank you to all of our guests. Without the guests and without the contributions, the brew wouldn't be possible. We're going to take some time out now. We're going to review and analyse and improve. We'll be back for season 3 on Friday the 8th of October, and I hope to see you then.